And we're going to have a small amendment to the schedule. We're going to have a lightning talk, a presentation, and a lightning talk. And then we're going to have a small break. And then at 2 o'clock, Julie Wortell and her team are going to join us for a presentation on the Homelessness Hub at UC San Diego. So we'll remain in this Zoom, but we will have a pause to allow for the break between those first three sessions and the fourth session. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome Elijah and Rita of UC Santa Barbara to talk about housing the ancient Maya of El Pilar. Oh, and before I do that, one last thing. We're going to hold questions till the end of sort of each of these two segments that we're doing. So we'll have the three presentations, time for some questions, the break, and then the UC San Diego group, and then questions for them. Mark Lab team, take it away.
Great, thank you. Do you mind if we share our screen?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Well, can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Elijah Chick,
My name is Rita Karajian.
and we're interns at the Mesoamerican Research Center, where we use traditional ecological knowledge from Maya forest gardeners to understand the ancient Maya people. And today we'll be talking about how we're using modern GIS tools to further that understanding.
So, welcome to El Pilar, an ancient Maya city located on the border of Belize and Guatemala with a flourishing Maya civilization during the late Classic period, around 600 to 900 CE. And that's across 20 square kilometers of land about. And so, this land existed as both permanent forest and managed areas divided into an iterative cycle of milpa fields, regenerating fields, and mature forest. The cycle, known as a milpa cycle, provided the Maya people with an ecological resource that helped support their basic needs, including shelter, which is what we'll be talking about today. So our fieldwork identified 1925 foundations of ancient Maya houses occupied at that time across the landscape. These houses were framed with posts, beams, and rafters. And here's an artist's conception showing some of the Maya names for parts of the building. And so each house lasts 40 years, meaning we need to build 49 houses every year. And yeah, okay. Wait, yeah. Okay, sorry. Um, so here's a timeline showing the requirements of post beams and rafters needed to build 49 houses a year that will ensure the maintenance of all houses through the MILPA and permanent cycle.
And with knowledge learned from the practices, experience, and cultural significance of the Maya forest gardeners and traditional ecological knowledge, as well as modeling the Milpa forest garden cycle with the post beams and rafters, we are producing results that are leading us to question well-established conceptions of the ancient Maya land use practices and discovering how the landscape of El Pilar would have been sustainably managed to provide the necessary materials for building houses. And here are some of the Maya forest gardeners that we actually work very closely with. They're all locals to the area of Belize and Bullet Tree Falls and El Pilar, and they know the land very well. So we're drawing a lot of our knowledge and cultural understanding and like historical, traditional ecological knowledge from them. And then on the GIS side of things, we used various shape files to determine what part of the area of interest was available for growing trees, designated to various land class assignments such as architecture, infield buffers, and more. Altogether, this helped us populate and create point layers to show the amount of trees grown and harvested over the 20-year cycle. The main layers we used were vector data of surveyed architecture, seen here, polygon data of architecture and infields, polygon data of steep areas that we deemed permanent forest, polygon data of the MILPA model with 20 years of MILPA fields, MILPA regenerative fields, and mature forest fields. And then we also used point layers, or we used point data to represent post beams and rafters with a 0.5 meter maximum base radius. And the quantity of each tree was determined based on sampling 1 hectare quadrants from the MILPA and the permanent forest. And here's a little representation of the MILPA cycle and its different components. The triangles represent harvestable post beams and rafters. And it cycles through the 20 years of the MILPA cycle to kind of show you where they would be drawing their resources from. And at the end of it all, our results kind of show that given the land area of El Pilar and the amount of houses that are needed to be built each year and the amount of resources needed to maintain the 1925 structures, we found that we are able to not only meet the required beams, posts, and rafters necessary, but also beat those expectations. And this kind of draws back to the common notion that the ancient Maya farming practices degraded the forest, but looking at the presence of housing remains at El Pilar, our results demonstrate that the Milpa forest garden cycle can actually provide more than enough trees to frame those structures and houses that were occupied and needed to be built. And overall, this presents a new perspective that highlights how the ancient Maya were able to sustainably balance their fields and forests and kind of change that narrative moving forwards with the use of traditional ecological knowledge and sustainable practices, land use practices. And if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to go to our website at the Mark Lab at UCSB and kind of get a better understanding of the happenings of our lab and what's happening here and what we're doing on this topic. But thank you guys. That's the end of our talk.
Thank you for
Thank you
listening.
very much, Elijah and Rita. Next up, I'm going to welcome Sosie Castile of UC Berkeley to talk about personal mapping from ancient cartographers to open source explorers.
Hi, everybody. I'm gonna share my screen really quick. Perfect. All right, can everybody see that? Yep, okay. All right, hi everybody. So like they said, my name is Sosie Castile. I go to UC Berkeley. This is my presentation, Don't Nap on Mapping. So a little bit about me. I'm a senior at UC Berkeley. I'm studying data science and forestry. And when I'm not in the computer lab, I'm usually running, biking, or participating in logging sports, which is a great community here at Cal. And I wanted to start with a fairly brief history of mapping. I just found out that visual representations of space have actually been traced to around 2300 BCE in Babylon. And they didn't really start applying geometry to mapping until like the ancient Greeks, which really laid the foundation for the science of mapping. And I mostly want to go into the history because I want to illustrate how historically spatial data has mainly been in the hands of the powerful and the privileged. And I think we can especially see this in the colonial era, here referring to like the 15th and 17th centuries, where European colonizers used maps as instruments of empire. And then by the 19th and 20th centuries, mapping turned technical, institutional, and became governments and militaries developed satellite imagery and GPS to redefine spatial accuracy and mainly for the purposes of warfare. But without that era, we could not reach the open source revolution of the late 20th and early 21st century. Tools like OpenStreetMap, QGIS, MapLibre have returned the creative agency of mapping to the individuals. And with the plethora of open source data available on the internet, anyone can map the world as they experience it in a variety of ways, digitally, with hand-drawn maps. There's handheld tools you can use out in the field, and I'm sure we've all experienced this. And I think that's a really beautiful way that we can just engage the way that we live our lives, but spatially. It's a way of defining our sense of meaning just in space. And for the first half of 2025, my sense of meaning was defined by this map right here. This is Madrid, Spain. I lived right in the city center studying abroad. And I immediately got my phone stolen out of my purse and was without GPS in a very unfamiliar and confusing city. If you've ever gone to Madrid, especially the city center where I lived, You will have noticed there is no attempt at uniformity or a grid system or a organization of the streets and buildings. And so the city played tricks on my brain, especially because I, A, did not speak very good Spanish, and B, did not have a phone to navigate myself. And so I resorted to stopping from cafe to cafe and mapping out my route using my computer and their Wi-Fi, and then drawing it in Sharpie on my arm, and then going to that place and then the next place with Wi-Fi, or just like sticking to my friends. And a week and a half later, I had a new phone, but I had gotten lost so many times that I practically had the city center memorized, major landmarks and the streets that I needed and all my subway stops. So, and I ended up traveling a lot while I was abroad, eventually racking up visits to 6 different countries, which is a lot of traveling for me. I'm definitely very grateful for that experience, but I kind of realized while I was there that I like my maps a lot smaller, more concentrated, and full of memories and histories and reminders of my own development. My first experience with GIS was in a course. We were taught to use ArcGIS Pro, but with a purpose, mainly ecology and forestry and habitat mapping. Um, and our final project was actually more of a fun project. We got to map the ideal habitat for Bigfoot. And that kind of made me realize there's a lot that I can do with these tools that I've been taught. So with that, I would like to give a brief demo of something that I've been working on, a personal project. So this is Berkeley. If you've never been, I insist you visit it at some point. It is beautiful here, and I really love my city. So I had a wonderful reunion with Berkeley after my 9 long months away from it, and felt compelled to trace my weekly routine here as a student, an athlete, and an explorer. So to make this, I used Leaflet. Leaflet is one of the most popular open source mapping libraries in the world. If you've ever used a website where you can drag, zoom, or interact with a map, there's a good chance somebody used Leaflet to build that. And the best part is it works with any regular website, which is why so many people use it, like journalists, activists, students, researchers, anybody can use this. And so the way that I was able to get this data, rather than hard code the longitude and latitudinal points of where I spend my time, I used a completely free tool called Google Timeline to trace where I was going. It's only slightly invasive, and downloaded that information as a JSON file, and then sorted where I go into stops and trips. So stops are these circles. You can see this big orange one is on campus, and the trips are these lines. And so the size of the circles is actually proportional to how much time I spend or feel like I spend at each location. And the absolutely massive blue circle down here is a breakfast spot that I go to almost every day. And then the orange circle is campus. You can kind of see that you're able to step through my week. This is definitely a work in progress, but I feel like I've been able to map a lot of my Berkeley haunts and illustrate to myself how much I am able to explore and take advantage of this place that I'm at right now. You can see, I mean, through the week, I typically just go from home to campus. That's why I'm a nerd with glasses. But then you could go to a Sunday where I take a long run to the Berkeley Marina and then go to logging sports practice. That's the little axe that just went all the way 2 towns over to Lafayette, where our practice arena is. And I really like this kind of mapping where you're just showing the way that you live your life where you are. And I would like to also discuss a few ideas for ways that you can map. This is a map of the Yuba River, and which is a project that I would like to take on in my life where I map the tributaries of the Yuba. But alternatively, maps that I've been thinking of creating are My Day on a Map, where you can map your 24-hour journeys wherever you are. One that I think is really beautiful is a migration or ancestry map, which is map where you're from, where your family has lived, places that have shaped your life, or even your parents and your grandparents' lives. That'd be a great Christmas present. And sorry, I'm having trouble. Okay, apparently I'm not allowed to do that. There we go. Okay, and an emotion map, which I think would be a very colorful and kind of heavy map where you assign colors to emotions like calm, anxious, energized, nostalgic on a map where you feel them in your town, on your campus, or in your home. And your favorite places trail. Map 5 to 10 locations that are personally meaningful, study spots, scenic lookouts, cafes, first date spots. My recommendation to get started with something like this is just print a map of your typical zone, like your city, your neighborhood, your campus, whatever, and just start drawing. Like, draw lines where you walk, circles where you sit, hearts where you feel happiness, X's where you tend to avoid, or something that I've seen a lot of people start doing is print out pictures and use push pins to attach them and Polaroids to the maps where those pictures were taken. I think that's really beautiful and definitely a great way to display your life spatially. And pictures worth 1,000 words. Thank you guys so much. There's my email if you have any questions, want to reach out about mapping strategies or more ideas for creative mapping. You're definitely welcome to. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Sosie. That was excellent. And next up, I'm going to welcome Seamus and James from NASA Lifelines to talk about satellite data and tools to address global wildlife challenges.
There we go. If I can find the unmute button. Thank you so much, and thanks for attending this session. My name is James Haithcote. I'm a principal consultant at Dev Global Partners. I'm also the community tools lead for the NASA Lifelines initiative. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Lifelines data series specifically, which is a program within the Lifelines initiative. But first, maybe a little quick about myself. I've been working in the geospatial and remote sensing field for over 15 years now. I spent most of that time in defense GeoInt, so geospatial intelligence, working on National Geospatial Intelligence Agency contracts with kind of a focus on research and development. And then I've spent the last 4 years with Dev Global Partners, focusing more on applications of geospatial data and remote sensing to global development and humanitarian challenges. So this is work that's very kind of near and dear to me. It kind of bridges the gap between technology and application, especially in resource-constrained environments. So I want to do a little background on NASA Lifelines overall, and then we'll kind of jump into the data series aspect of it. So a little over 2 years ago, Dev Global, in partnership with NASA, launched the Lifelines Initiative. Very broadly, Lifelines is a 6-year community building initiative that aims to improve the use of earth science, remote sensing, geospatial data, and data derivatives for humanitarian efforts around the globe, and also see an increase in cross-disciplinary collaboration between scientists, technologists, researchers, humanitarians. Currently, there are over 5,000 humanitarian organizations globally who serve about 362 million people currently experiencing humanitarian emergencies. Yet, in spite of that, only about 1% of humanitarian aid budgets go towards innovation. Those organizations are often resource constrained, or they're mostly focused on response. So that can limit the ability or willingness to risk precious resources on innovation or improvement of processes or ingestion and processing of new data types. Despite that, there are roughly 500 humanitarian applications already powered by earth science, and there's a growing demand for satellite-derived data across sectors and geographies, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And that demand is because remote sensing and geospatial data are critical to humanitarian missions. They provide broad coverage, objective data, and repeatable observations for those groups and for those use cases. For example, during natural disasters, remote sensing data can allow us to quickly assess damage to infrastructure, enabling rapid response. In conflict zones, they help monitor population displacement by detecting changes in settlement patterns. They can support detailed agricultural assessments, identifying drought-affected areas to improve food security interventions. But ultimately, remote sensing data and geospatial data can enable timely decision-making with greater accuracy and greater confidence, ensuring better outcomes. So we know that the uses and applications of GIS, remote sensing, geospatial data are vast, but humanitarian crises are generally not discrete and siloed. Humanitarian crises are often complex and overlapping. For example, a successful damage assessment following a hurricane. The assessment would not only impact restoration of infrastructure, but also help to understand displaced populations and available routes for movement and settlement. And then if you can understand the displacement routes and settlements, you'll have a better understanding of the impact on food stores and clean drinking water, et cetera, et cetera. So all that to say these crises are almost always intertwined, and remote sensing and geospatial data can help us better understand them and make better decisions in those crises. So with that, over the last few years of the Lifelines initiative, we've spent a lot of time engaging with our humanitarian advisors and the humanitarian community to try to understand where gaps exist in the adoption and use of remote sensing data and satellite data. We know that there's this veritable mountain of open source data, even just at NASA, not to mention the many other repositories, but what needs to happen to realize the value of those assets for humanitarians? Now, what we found is that there's not just like a single sticking point, but rather a series of hurdles that prevent humanitarians from taking advantage of remote sensing to improve outcomes of their intervention or their response. And there's certainly more than this. There's technical and resource limitations, which I don't want to just push under the rug because those are very, very real. But the primary struggles can be summarized in 5 challenges. And those are that humanitarians often don't know what data is useful. If they know what data is useful, they don't know what's available. If they know what's available, they don't know how to access it, or the access tools are unwieldy and unintuitive, which I'm sure many of you have encountered. If they manage to identify it, find it, download it, there's often extra processing that requires technological know-how. And if they make it through all those steps, they still face the challenge of using those data to generate actionable insights. So our challenge is, how do we overcome these challenges? And that leads us to the data series. So simply put, the data series intends to resolve those challenges for humanitarians by starting with the challenging questions that humanitarians are trying to answer and building a collection of resources backwards from there. The intention is that rather than providing a data asset or code base or software or tools that work across many different applications, let's look at a humanitarian challenge and decide what's relevant for that use case and for those users and those decision makers. So we want to approach the problem from the perspective of the humanitarians working to respond to crises. What does a humanitarian in Bangladesh who is concerned about the resilience of health services to flooding need to know? What tools will benefit them? What data sets are available for anticipatory action and for response or supporting resilience? And then can we assemble those resources in a meaningful way for specific users and use cases? And can we provide them with the context and education needed for that decision maker and kind of meet them where they're at, both in terms of technical limitations and capacity? Now, I want to be very clear because I think this is likely where a lot of your heads went when I started talking. We're not trying to build some master repository of geospatial data, and we're not really even going to be hosting any data assets ourselves at all. There's organizations that do that already. OCHA's Humanitarian Data Exchange, HDX, Source Cooperative, NASA's Earth Explorer, many places do that effectively. So we're not interested in hosting data. And I'm sure you've seen efforts to do that in the past, aggregate it all, host it in one place. Not interested in that. Rather, what we want to do is leverage the existing platforms, the existing interfaces and repositories, but in a way that helps us to tackle some of those challenges we looked at. We'll provide context for the use of those data and information regarding application. So with our challenges in mind, we're looking at collections of tools and data that are applicable to a specific humanitarian use case and putting them together in a way that is actually accessible. And these are what we're calling our data studio packages. We are focused on high priority, high impact humanitarian cases. And I'll say high priority in this case means those use cases where a significant need for data and tools intersects with high potential impact of adoption. Our prioritization efforts were initially steered by the Caribou Space Beyond Borders report, but after a couple of years of community building with the Lifelines initiative, we've stayed very close to the humanitarian community, and we've shifted the development of the data studio packages and the prioritization of the use cases around the needs that have arisen. So more practically speaking, what do these data studio packages look like? Well, those of you who work with the data know that the value of geospatial data is usually realized when used in combinations, combining satellite imagery with geolocated vector data, overlaying vector data with climate data, et cetera, et cetera. So the power of data combinations is particularly true for humanitarian use cases where these compounding crises that I talked about earlier require this systems thinking approach. Now, unfortunately, that also means that their quest for relevant data is equally complex. So the first step in assembling our Data Studio package after identifying a target use case is to collect the data assets, the tools that will help a humanitarian in better responding to or measuring the response to that type of humanitarian crisis. And that's how we try to tackle those first two challenges: what's useful and what's available. Now, these packages aren't just going to be a list of data assets either. They are intended to pair those assets with education and informational resources associated to the deployment for that use case. And so that'll help us to solve the other three challenges. How do I access it? How do I process it? And how do I generate actionable insights? Each data asset listed in the package will be paired with specific instructions on where to get it, how to use it, how to download it, how to process it, and then how specifically to use that data asset for the use case. Additionally, where there's data gaps or where there's multiple options for a data set, we'll try to provide educational materials to identify workarounds or facilitate partnerships to acquire commercial data, things like that. Now, I'll say that this educational component of the Data Studio is perhaps the most important, and this is kind of manifested in our how-to section that I'll get into in a minute. But I think that I would say that we can probably universally agree that a lot of the data access platforms and APIs and existing documentation can be overwhelming, even if you have a background in GIS or geospatial or remote sensing. So humanitarians, it's even more of a blocker. All right, I've been talking a lot about Lifelines. I do want to talk just very briefly about what we've done so far under the data series and how we've kind of ended up at this Data Studio package place. So sorry, I skipped forward there, my little sticky keys there. So while we're just now kind of on the brink of launching our Data Studio packages publicly, the Data Series program itself has been working behind the scenes across the Lifelines programming for the last 2 years to validate that this approach, this Data Studio package approach, would be valuable to our community and to gather feedback and insights from the community to help us better understand what problems we need to tackle and how. The very first place that it made an appearance was at our first scientist speed dating event. It was at a conference called SAT Summit. And I know that's a funny name, but the scientist speed dating events are really just intended to bring together people from across our community. So humanitarian scientists, researchers, funders, and technologists to do some rapid brainstorming and problem solving around specific humanitarian needs. So originally, to help facilitate some of those discussions, we put together a collection of data assets that would likely be really relevant to the use cases of the participating humanitarians and humanitarian organizations. And the idea was that rather than just have conversations that are kind of pie in the sky, we could have productive discussions around practical use of available data sets for those humanitarians. The next place it appeared was more in an applied context in support of our humanitarian simulation. So in October of, I think it was 2024, but I'm losing track of my years. Lifelines hosted a humanitarian simulation in which teams assembled from our diverse community had the opportunity to respond to a series of simulated crises in Goma in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. So while our timeline was simulated, the events and the data were actually real. So decision-making by the response teams could leverage real data. This kind of represented a similar but broader approach to the Data Studio packages, where we are actually looking across all of these use cases to see how we could impact the outcomes or the ability of decision makers to act quickly by kind of pre-batching some of this data, some of this education and tools. And for the humanitarian simulation, I'll say I couldn't believe the amount of maps that were generated, the amount of insights that were generated to support the decisions that each of the teams were making over just the 3 days of that simulation. And then more recently, and this is the last one in terms of the history, we wrapped up a second round of our Ready for Impact pitch competition. And that's a program it's kind of like a Shark Tank style pitch competition that allows teams with proven technology or methodology to pitch their projects that are using remote sensing in a humanitarian context or a humanitarian mission to a panel of funders. So to support the teams beyond just kind of the funding and in-kind contributions, we also put together a very tailored set of data recommendation packages. So the packages were based on a review of the data assets and methods that teams were currently using and kind of aimed to provide alternative or supplementary data sets to improve their outcomes. And then we paired that with some brief methodological recommendations for how to actually integrate those data sets effectively into their current processes. So while the humanitarian simulation data was really broad, covered a lot of use cases, this is kind of an overcorrection in the opposite direction, where we're specific, not even just specific use cases, but really specific applications within those use cases. So all of that was to kind of validate that what we are trying to do with the Data Studio packages is going to be impactful and valuable to the community. And I know that was a lot of background, and this is intended to be a workshop session, so I apologize, but I wanted to kind of show the journey of the data series and how we ended up where we are, that this is something that we thought out and we validated, and also just to give some context around what we're including in the Data Studio packages and why. So with that, let's actually jump into the current state of the Data Studio packages and take a look at one. Let me swap here. Okay. So this is our Wildfire early warning and rapid response Data Studio package. And we'll kind of go over the structure here first. So each Data Studio package has 4 primary parts. We have case studies, dashboards, data assets, and our how-to guides. Our case studies are a collection of different types of publications or reports that show successful and impactful uses of remote sensing and geospatial data for this particular use case. So we want to point to examples where others have used these types of assets and information and have seen improved outcomes in their uses, and be able to showcase those methods that could be replicated across other organizations, or even showcase partners in implementation. If there's an organization that's particularly good at this thing, maybe you can partner with us and we can do the same thing. Actually, let's click through a few of these too, because I think some of these are kind of compelling. So there's FireSat, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, kind of early days there, a part of the Earth-Fire Alliance. We've also tried to cover a good chunk of the globe, since a lot of kind of the beneficiaries of this type of work are not going to be US or Western based. We have some older examples of successful implementations, but they are ones that successfully use the data assets that we have included in this package and are good examples of it. And then things like integration of SMS or text early warning systems that could easily be replicated. The next one is our dashboards, and the dashboards are intended to be just like the quick and dirty information sources. We want to show places where you can go and look quickly at a pre-built resource that provides some insights or information that'll be useful to you as you prepare to respond to a crisis, or you're planning action around or related to that use case. And again, some of these you may be familiar with, some of these you may not. We have things like the NASA Firms Fire Map. We can actually go and take a look at that. And again, you may have seen these things, but a really quick way to get a sense of, here are fire events or fire detections that are happening at a global scale. We have the Global Wildfire Information System. Let's see, that kind of aggregates both the firm's data and things like your fire weather index. We can say, we'll turn our fire danger forecast. Let's see. We can turn on our active fires. That'll replicate what we see over on the firm's site. And again, we can now really quickly understand both where fire incidents are, but also the fire weather forecast and how severe, how quickly those can spread. Let's see, next section are the data assets. And you might have guessed, this is the section where we share all the relevant data sources and the remote sensing data that will be useful for this use case. Now, these are often the same sources that are fed into some of our dashboards above, and they may be some of the same assets utilized by the case studies. They're also the resources that will be used in our how-to guides. And I know that seems kind of duplicative to have the data sources and also the dashboards that showcase them. But in many cases, when you're trying to build an automation or you're trying to build a local fire early warning system, you need access to the APIs. You need to know how to download the data assets, not just visualize them on a dashboard. And then finally, the how-to guides. And these are perhaps the most important part of the Data Studio package, as they kind of tie all the other elements together into instructions. Now, we're trying to include different levels of sophistication for implementation as well, with kind of a mind towards our user personas. Maybe you're the one-person GIS team at an organization and don't have the time or technical background to deploy a full early warning system. So we want to provide some guidance or some value to that person. Or, perhaps you are at an organization that just decided to make some investment into this and they want to build a custom application or interface or dashboard. And we have a deployment that includes some light coding and maybe a little bit of machine learning. But the overall idea is to be able to provide enough implementations that we can meet people where they're at, both in terms of capacity and technological ability, and provide some value. Now, we're not going to work through an entire how-to because we certainly don't have time, but I do want to show you a few of the things included in a Data Studio package and how they can be used at different levels and in combination. So I'm going to pick and choose a little bit, but we won't do a whole how-to, I promise. So one of the things that I mentioned was one of the obstacles to seeing increased use of remote sensing data for humanitarian use cases is simply knowledge of what exists and what's relevant. if we can surface some of those things, there are some really straightforward utilities that add a lot of value. So let's just go back to our firm's data here. So let's see. Included in this is a description. We know that this data set provides the location of active fires detected by NASA satellites, VIIRS, and MODIS. Includes timestamp, lat long, confidence, and fire radiative power. To use it, let's see, we can get rapid alerts of new fires in my area of interest. So for me, as a one-man GIS team, that can be very, very useful. If I'm at a local response office, maybe that's all I need to improve on the current state. We can monitor fire spread, identify hotspots. Let's see, a little bit more information about the license and recollect frequency, and then our access instructions. So we know that we can go look at the firm's fire map, which we just did. On-demand download, we can actually download it for some custom maps. There is an API if we want to do a little bit of automation. And then we can get email alerts by signing up on firms for automated alerts. So let's go and actually look at this resource. And here's the fire map that we just looked at before. Great. We can see all our fire detections. But what I'm mostly interested in is this fire alert. And so we might click through this and we'll just say, I want to be notified when there's a fire in my region of interest. Go grab that code. It's pretty quick. Don't worry, we don't have to sit here waiting for it. Got it. Now you can see, you'll be able to see in a second. I've already got an alert set, but maybe I'm interested in a specific region. And for my purposes, I'm interested in Centralia, Washington, just a little southern part of Washington. So let's just call this, fire. I want a custom region. We can use our map to specify that custom region. And let's see, I know that we're up here somewhere, right around here. For polygon. I want all the alerts. I want them in real time because I'm responsible for the well-being of my community. I can have them send me a text and a map. Here's my map size. And I want them to send me a KML file so I can actually do some mapping. I can submit that, and now I've basically set up a most elementary fire early warning system. Now, it also just so happens that I have I have too many screens open is apparently what happened. I actually got one of these alerts. So we can see, okay, NASA firms, I got my real-time 4 fire hotspots detected. That's from my old alert. And we can go and view this map on the firm server. So right there, we've added value to our community, to our position as an early responder within that community in terms of protecting us from fires. Now, let's say we want to go a little bit deeper and we want to understand more appropriately the impact or risk to infrastructure. How can we do that? So I think the way that I want to do that is I want to display the VIIRS data or the firm's data in QGIS and do a little bit of manual analysis. Well, I happen to know that this how-to includes a link for how to add live or a streamed data source for firms into QGIS. I won't make us click through all of this because I don't want to bore you that much, but we'll say I go through, I get my server URL and I go and request my map key and I go ahead and pop it into QGIS. I've already got my AOI up here showing Centralia, Washington. This is my area of interest. And I have added my firm's stream. So it's now live populated across or on my map. We've already added that here. Let's make sure that we've got our North America fire incidents. And there they are. We can see all of our little red triangles and all the current detections in the last 24 hours based on our layer selection. We also see that there are 2 within my area of interest near Centralia. So let's actually think about how we can understand the risk infrastructure. Maybe we go back to our Data Studio package and think, is there anything that can help us to understand how quickly this will spread and kind of the area that we need to evacuate? Now we can go to the fire weather index forecasts, and we can go and look at that map that I showed before. That was over here. And get a sense of how fast this fire is going to spread. And we, for the sake of time, we won't actually do this analysis, but say we've determined it spreads 5 kilometers in 4 hours, and 4 hours is our minimum time that we need to provide for an effective evacuation. So we'll go back to our fire points. We'll select those ones that are in our area of interest, and we'll buffer them out 5 kilometers. Now we see that it's certainly overlapping a good amount of structures and infrastructure. So how do we understand exactly what buildings are at risk and who to notify? Well, let's go back to our Data Studio package. Let's see. I know that we have, let's see, population data. We could download gridded population data to understand how many people might be at risk, but I actually want to take that a step further and understand the specific buildings that are at risk. So again, we're picking and pulling a little bit here, but I know that in this how-to, there is a link to download OSM data. So we could go here, we download our buildings data set, and we are going to load that GeoJSON into our map. Again, I've already done that for us, so you don't have to watch the boring parts. But there you go. We now see our building data sets, and we can run a simple intersect to see what buildings are at risk. So we're selecting our infrastructure. We're using our buffers. We're going to run that and close it. Good, I can see our selection there. And then let's go ahead and take a look at this. All right. Right off the bat, up in that top bar there, we see that we've got over 1,100 buildings that are at risk. And if we sort these, we see that there's 2 churches, a lot of residential buildings, 5 school buildings, and we can even get the names of some of these different structures from the attribution. So now we have not only a fire early warning notification, but now we know exactly who to notify. We know that there's a fire station within that area that may be able to support in response. And we have a lot better picture of risk to our actual community. Now, this was a very manual effort, but it was also really quick. Even those steps that I kind of skimmed over, overall, altogether, those steps would take less than an hour to actually complete end to end, even including signing up for accounts where you need them, whether that's through Earth Data or through the hot OSM export tool. So very accessible. Now, the way that we've kind of constructed these Data Studio packages, though, is to keep pushing this, keep stepping forward in terms of automation or kind of sophistication. So all of those steps that we took could very easily be replicated in a very simple Google Colab notebook. So for example, we have put in our firms key here. We have our AOI file, which is just the AOI bounding box that we saw on my QGIS map. And we have our buildings file, which are the same building vectors that we downloaded from OSM. We've selected our same data source here that we used for our initial detection, a day range, so how many days back do we want to look, and a buffer, and ignore the weird over 5 kilometer buffer. I wasn't very precise in my buffer on my QGIS map. So we can just go ahead and run this. And we see that we're hitting the API. We've got a total building count. And there we go. Buildings within our buffer distance of a firm's detection, 1,133. So the same as what we had on our map. You also see over here that we have a buildings at risk GeoJSON that we can download and go and visualize in QGIS. So let's turn these off. We'll add our layer. And our downloads. And symbolize that a little bit better so you can see it. And there we go. There's our buildings that are at risk for fire. And now we see that there's gaps here. There's a lot of residential buildings that intersected this. So maybe we need to supplement this with another building vector data set, or we do want to use population data to understand the community members that we need to notify of this. But that Python script now is a step towards full automation. So now rather than doing all those manual steps, we just run this script. And you can kind of imagine how this snowballs or how this progresses. Now, maybe we want to incorporate some of our fire weather information to dynamically generate our buffer. So it's not just a fixed 5 kilometer buffer. Maybe we want to deploy this on a little VM so that we can run it continuously or at intervals to send us notifications. Maybe we hook it up to a Twilio interface so that it actually automatically sends notifications to affected community members that there's a wildfire in their region. And that's really the approach that we've taken with these Data Studio packages is here are the resources. Here are examples of other people that have done this. Here are really quick references. And then here are ways that you can build a system that is better than what you have now at different levels of sophistication. Now, I know this presentation was heavy on background and light on actual workshop, so I apologize for that, but I kind of did that for a reason. So the particular collection of people who showed up to this workshop to do GIS work on your own time, you are all kind of my kindred spirits, and I'm confident that I could point any one of you at one of the Data Studio packages, and you could complete a how-to without my walkthrough or directions. So what I'm actually hoping for is to activate you and make a few requests. So to carry this forward, it's going to require the community. I need early testers of Data Studio packages. I need moderators to review submitted Data Studio packages prior to publication, and I need new Data Studio packages. This effort's not something that just the Lifelines team can carry forward, and it's not something that we want to carry forward alone. We want this to be something that's community driven. So while we're tackling this initial lift, we want it to be built and maintained by the community well beyond the life of the Lifelines initiative. So things to keep an eye out for. Soon on the Lifeline site, there's going to be some mechanisms for you to get involved in this effort, whether you want to build out a whole Data Studio package, which would be wonderful, or just drop some helpful links or comments to enhance the existing packages. There's all kinds of ways for you to engage. I'll also say, to maybe alleviate some fears here, that the interface and the method for contributing is really simple. We built out this Data Studio package builder tool that's going to be public facing early next year that will allow anyone to submit partial or complete Data Studio packages to share with the community. In the meantime, if you have a special interest in this program, please get in touch via the Lifelines website or just reach out to me directly, and I'd love to talk about how we can work together to carry this forward. I'll leave that slide there for just a second, but that concludes my presentation. So thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so very much for that, James. Definitely learned a lot. One of my questions for you is actually going to be, how can folks get involved? And then went right in to tell us how we can get involved. So that's fantastic. We are going to open the floor for some questions now. I actually have a question for Sosi. You mentioned, I loved your presentation. It's the type of thing that I love doing in particular, and it's the type of thing that I also love as a map librarian talking about with my students. You mentioned that you're a senior, and I was wondering if your work with GIS, both in more academic settings than also some personal settings, if that sort of inspired you to potentially pick a career post-graduation involving things like mapping and GIS. Think we may have lost her. That's okay. Do folks have questions for James about this excellent NASA Lifelines initiative? And it looks like we have some requests for you to put your contact in the chat as well, if you'd be able to do that for folks. I also want to just echo some of the positive comments I've seen in the chat. I love how this promotes open source work, especially for those of us that are in education. It's more and more in the UC system, we're leaning on open source materials, so it's really, really great to see this as an open source initiative. And then a question I also have for you, James. I was wondering if you could give an example. You talked about the students that were able to pitch to investors, talking about the different tools that you have. If you're able to talk about like examples of different like crises or things that folks have proposed to work on before utilizing your tools and the NASA Lifelines work.
I don't know, I can never find my unmute button. Yeah, absolutely. So our Ready for Impact pitch competition has been really, really cool. We've had a lot of applications, particularly for this last round, and we invited 13 people to present, and it really spans a lot of different use cases. Last year's Ready for Impact competition saw a project focused on building damage assessments and also kind of more specifically on like debris quantification using remote sensing data, using some SAR and some kind of advanced methods in machine learning. That went on to be funded by NASA. Over the last two cohorts, we've seen about a little over $2 million in funding unlocked for these teams. But there's nothing really that I won't say there's nothing we haven't seen. There's a huge breadth of problems in the humanitarian space that intersect with geospatial, but we've seen things from flood modeling to disease suitability habitat modeling, the damage assessments, conflict and displacement. But most of them are like these tools or applications that are kind of in this fledgling state and they need a little bit of boost. They need an injection either in terms of partnership, in-kind contributions from our partners like at AWS or Google, or just that cash infusion, like we need some staff time and we got to work on this.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Do other folks have questions for James? Yes, Donna, go ahead.
Yes, hi James and everybody. Donna Miranda McGay with California Tribal GIS. My question on humanitarian, I look at this is and I'm in California, by the way, and I'm thinking that there may be an impact of our agricultural industry in regards to the workforce impact. Of course, I don't want to get political, but the ICE impacts of the scared worker out there in the field and farmers having a hard time getting workforce going uh, because folks are leaving. And so I'm just kind of curious if somehow down the road there's any kind of mapping of that impact. Yeah. So just something to think outside the box there.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the next projects that we're kind of looking at, or one of the next data studio packages we're looking at, and I'm kind of teasing this, it's unofficial, but we're looking at partnering with some of our colleagues at Mercy Corps to tackle food security. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a large overlap there in terms of applications for understanding impacts on agriculture and kind of by extension food security using that data studio package. But I'll also say, as you have those problems, because some of these are really unique and there's things that I'm not going to think of, and there are things that might not even surface in our humanitarian community, but they're very important problems. And that's where I would love some partnership, sort of experts who know about this space or know about these problems to help contribute to, or even just kind of partner with us to build out a data studio package so that others can understand the impacts of the concerns that you mentioned. Can we map that? Can we quantify it? And then can we report that and share that back in a meaningful way to our community? And then can others replicate that work?
Thank you.
Any more questions for James at this time? So I want to give a big round of applause for this first section of presenters right now. We still have a few minutes before the UC San Diego team will join us to talk about the Homelessness Hub, but don't go anywhere. I want to with our captive audience to promote our virtual gallery as well at this time. I'm going to share my screen really briefly to showcase one of my favorite parts of UCGIS Week, especially this year. If you visit us on our UC GIS Week website, which if you've registered, I'm sure you have seen before, you can actually go to our virtual gallery. So I have the virtual gallery pulled up here, and I'll share the link in the chat as well. This is not exclusive to UC GIS Week. Our virtual gallery stays live, has things that have been shared in previous years, and you can submit anything that you'd like to upload to our virtual gallery at any time of year through our UCGIS website. And this is where folks are able to upload their different maps for us to look at, both interactive and static maps. And a lot of these more recent submissions are for presentations that will be going on this week as a sort of supplementary material. But they also don't have to be tied to GIS Week presentations. Folks upload all types of maps that they've worked on. There's lots of really interesting things to see here. It's great to get in terms of examples of what sort of great GIS projects are out there and all of the different ways folks in the UC community are utilizing GIS. And I want to take a moment to, oh, great question, Donna. Yes, I believe you should be able to submit Esri story map projects to the Hub site. But I can also take a moment, since we were just talking about NASA Lifelines, we can take a look at their submission. You can see, oh, perfect. It's even a story map story. I won't go through it piece by piece, but you can see how somebody has utilized NASA Lifelines data for landslides and has this lovely looking story map. And I believe this is tied to a presentation happening later this week as well, if I remember correctly. But you can upload your work and have it there so folks within the UC community can see it. Yeah, their data backbones. They talk about the Data Studio package they utilized. Let's see what other fun things they have here. Oh, I've looked at this before. The landslide inventory hazards portal from the USGS as well. And they've got some great case examples here too. So if you haven't used story maps before, story maps is also a great tool to utilize both, your narrative and integrating maps and some visual media. And you can utilize all of this to make your own projects and then share them with our GIS community. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, James. Yes, one of their series fellows was able to create that and share that. Oh, excellent. And Donna has shared a link to something that they will be uploading soon. Sequoia Forest Recording Project. Sounds fantastic. I also want to highlight too, we had a talk on the California vegetation burn severity by CAL FIRE just this morning. Maybe you were able to join us. And they've been able to upload some of their recent work that they've done in terms of mapping wildfire burn severity into, let's see, have uploaded their online viewer into our online gallery. Oh, perfect. And Danielle in the chat has also dropped a direct link to our submission form as well. So if you have anything you'd like to include, again, it does not have to be tied to a UC GIS Week presentation. It could be something you worked on for a class or publication or other project. We highly recommend you upload your materials. It's a really great way to get things out there and to be able to share them with the broader UC GIS community. And so we had this lovely talk this morning about burn severity. This was from the campfires, I'm sure many of you remember. And it tells you about the different types of forest and how severe it was burned, as well as the non-forest materials that burn, such as like shrubberies and grasslands, and the levels of severity. So that is a quick plug to join our virtual gallery. Please, I highly encourage you to share your materials. I love being able to see everything that gets uploaded for folks. And we now have all of our presenters for our final presentation of this section, which is Julie Wartell, Samantha Lee, Kieran Stanko, and Caitlin Shen from UC San Diego to talk about the Homelessness Hub, which they actually also have something in our virtual gallery. So you should check that out as well after we let them present.
Thank you very much, Maggie. I'm going to share my screen. And there you go. I'm going to make you all small. Hello, everyone. This is I think, fourth GIS week, UC GIS week, and I am honored to again lead an amazing team of students to talk about some of the work we're doing at the Homelessness Hub at UC San Diego. So, as Maggie mentioned, I'm joined by Caitlin Chen, Samantha Lee, and Kieran Stenko. So I am going to start it off and give you some background and then let them talk about some of the projects that they have worked on. We have a lot to talk about, but we narrowed it down to focusing on 3 of their projects. And then, as Maggie mentioned, we do have the dashboard that Samantha will be talking about is in the gallery as well. So Who are we and what do we do? The Homelessness Hub was started as a basic GIS portal with homelessness related data and maps in 2020. It started by a group of UCSD researchers. We're based in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, and they were at a meeting to talk about different researchers throughout San Diego County that were doing research around homelessness. And one of them just reached out to me and said, "Hey, can we map where the reports for homeless encampments are?" Sure, here you go. Can we add parks? Can we add bus stops? Sure. And I guess a bunch of people around the room all said, wow, like no one has looked at homelessness spatially, all together with multiple data layers on a map in San Diego County. And so we got a small grant. And then in 2022, we got some private funding to expand. So we now are one current managing director full time. Three of us are faculty. We have a staff research assistant, three postdocs, and then six undergraduate research assistants. Three of those that you're going to hear from today are part of the GIS team that I manage. So while GIS is at the core, we also have expanded. We have a lot of qualitative research as well. We're going to focus on the GIS today. We have numerous collaborations and studies. I'm going to highlight a few of them and let the students talk about them in more detail. And we hope to continue into the future with expanding our research. And really, it's about applying our research into policy and into further research. I don't have here, but a really cool thing that we are partnering with San Diego State. One of the groups, they have an NSF fund looking at using AI and imagery and data layers around homelessness as well. So we are helping them out when we can. Our current GIS related projects, we have a really big project called the Homeless Services Ecosystem Evaluation, essentially doing a lot of different aspects about homeless and shelters. So the GIS part of it is actually pretty small. We have created a shelter dashboard that's in partnership with some other folks. So they're going to be releasing it, we're hoping in the next month. And then we're also doing some safe parking, safe sleeping mapping that we're creating some layers and doing some other things around that. The next one, the downtown partnership mapping, is what Samantha will be talking about. The initial data that we collected was based on the downtown partnership and paper, hand-drawn PDFs. So groups of students over the last couple years have digitized 100,000 points. And it has become this dashboard that you will see. The homeless encampment count exploration is led by one of our postdocs. And we envisioned originally a whole spatial model and then have spent many months cleaning and evaluating data. So at this point, we're going to be releasing a paper and some accompanying maps about the different ways homeless and homeless encampments are counted in San Diego County. 311 analysis, we are working with a team of graduate students that are getting their master's in computational social science. So 311, for people not familiar, is the non-emergency complaints or reports. So people within the city of San Diego can report by phone or report on an app to say, hey, there's a homeless encampment over here. So we're doing some spatial temporal analysis as well as some large language modeling, or the students are doing that. That's above my head. And then lastly, the Homelessness Hub GIS portal that we have a lot of data, maps, and more. This is just kind of an overview of that. If you wanted to grab the QR code, it takes you right to our portal. So our portal now sits within a larger content management system that is the Homelessness Hub. And then we have our GIS Hub portal within that, but you can go directly there if you're really just interested in the maps and data. And then lastly, for my part, in terms of background, If you go out to our site, we have a wide variety of story maps. We have the whole data repository and portal that Caitlin's going to be talking about. The story maps, Kieran will be talking about one of them. We have some different experiences, dashboards, etc., and then a variety of static maps that have been made for research projects or other student work related to homelessness. So I encourage you to check out our website after you get excited about what you hear about today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin.
My name is Caitlin, and I'm one of the student researchers here at Homelessness Hub. And I'm going to introduce our Atlas Interactive Map. So this was created through ArcGIS Instant Apps, and it allows users to create their own maps using our publicly available homelessness-related data that we've sourced from a variety of organizations in the San Diego area. And so users can choose any base map available through ArcGIS, which is shown in the top left, as they can add as many of our public layers as they would like, and then use the interactive legend at the bottom to change the order of the layers and edit the visibility. And the bottom left shows a quick example of some of the layers that we've added. Next slide, please. These are some of the additional features that the Atlas map offers for more in-depth analysis of our layers. So users can measure the distance between any points in imperial and metric. They can also measure the area of any shape that they choose to draw by placing points to create a polygon. Users can use the sketch tool to draw lines that are solid, dotted, or dashed. They can also draw polygons of any shape. They can add symbols to show any locations of interest and create an elevation profile for any distance. So through all of these features and using our publicly available layers, users can engage more meaningfully with our data layers, and it encourages them to better understand the geospatial reality of homelessness in San Diego.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. And just wanted to forgot to shout out at the beginning to Amy Work, who has helped us from the very beginning and especially pointed us to this Atlas app that we have started using. So thanks, Caitlin. I'm going to turn it over to Kieran to talk about our eviction mapping.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kieran Stanko. I'm another student researcher at the Homelessness Hub, and I'll be talking about our project mapping evictions in San Diego County. And so for the past year, since 2018, we've been getting data on residential evictions from the San Diego County Sheriff's Office. And we do a public records request, and they give it to us in a PDF format, as shown here. But unfortunately, because we want to map it, we need to convert it into an Excel first. So unfortunately, when I tried it for the most recent public records request, because the addresses are in multiple lines, there's not a one-to-one match. So luckily, one of our other student researchers, Michael, was able to write a Python script to make it into an Excel format. And then the second step is a recent step that we actually discovered recently, that they had been giving us residential and commercial eviction data. In the occupants, we noticed some businesses and realized that it was actually, going back to 2018, they had included residential and commercial evictions. So the next step was to filter out the commercial data. Keywords like suite in the address, incorporated, corp, LLC, or DBA, doing business as were some of the keywords that we found to filter out those commercial evictions. And it was not perfect, but we got a product that we felt like was accurate and displayed correct rates for residential evictions. And then so the next step was in ArcGIS to geocode the addresses and overlay the land use to identify any other non-residential evictions. So here you can see this is an area by UC San Diego, and each triangle is an eviction in the most recent data we have. And then the purple is residential and the gray is non-residential. So we sorted them into residential or non-residential categories, and then identified any points that were outside the residential. And this was a fairly simple process for most years, but 2023 data, we had no occupant data, so we couldn't filter out in the initial step. So this led to a more intensive checking process. And then another complication was that some evictions in mixed-use zones could have either been residential or commercial. And so there was a more intensive process checking for that, including looking at different apartments, real estate sites, and just trying to verify that whether they were commercial or residential. Next slide. And then so the final step and the finished product was to map the evictions by city and zip code and analyze the different rates. And so we obtained census data for renter households through the 5-year American Community Survey, and then divided the total evictions for each year by the total renter households to get a rate. And then we mapped them by zip code, as you can see in the map on the left. And then we found the rate by each of the municipalities in San Diego County on the right. And we kind of concluded that neighborhoods of lower socioeconomic status tend to have higher eviction rates for renter households, which kind of makes sense with the other research we've been doing. However, interestingly, their lockout rate in terms of a percentage of the filing rate, the filing rate is when and then landlord files an eviction lawsuit in court. And then if it isn't resolved, the sheriff actually comes to the property and executes a lockout. So we found that the lockout rate, in terms of the filing rate, was lower. And then we're hoping to use this data to better understand evictions in the county, where to direct resources, and hopefully fully further understand the rate of evictions, especially in terms of different ordinances relating to evictions, such as COVID, when there were eviction moratoriums. And then in San Diego in 2023, there was a tenant protection ordinance that went into effect saying you couldn't evict anyone without a just cause. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kieran. And again, as you've seen, that we have students come and go. We're fortunate Kieran's actually going to be with us for 3 years, but we often have projects that have lasted several years. And fortunately, students can step in and take over and start updating, but you'll also see the common theme, and our students will attest to spend a lot of time cleaning data, as anyone that has done GIS, I'm sure, can agree with, especially non-raster data. So thanks, Kieran. Samantha?
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha. I'm also a student researcher with the Homelessness Hub. So this is the San Diego Downtown Partnership Dashboard. This data provides geographic locations for people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in downtown San Diego, as counted by enumerators from the Downtown San Diego Partnership for the dates between January 1st, 2014 and December 30th, 2024. So the number of individuals enumerated over time is not a unique count of individuals, and if a person was experiencing unsheltered homelessness for multiple months, they would be counted separately each month. As Julie mentioned before, in the past, these enumerators have done these counts completely with pen and paper, and we've assisted with digitizing those maps. But this year, they're finally making the transition to a Survey 123 tool, which will definitely help with just streamlining and generally improving the accuracy of the count. So on the left side of the dashboard, we have the map with all points, as well as total counts both by dwelling type and overall. And on the right side, you'll see sums via a table indicating neighborhood and total count, and then a bar graph indicating camping type by neighborhood. Next slide, please. The map and the dashboard can be filtered in 4 different ways. So year, month, dwelling type, and neighborhood. We have 2 examples. On the left, this is filtered to individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness in city center during the first 6 months of 2023. And then on the right, this is what that bar graph from the previous slide would look like filtered to a single neighborhood. So East Village South for all years and all dwelling types. And this makes it really, really easy to look at changes over time and make clear some of those spatial nuances. Some disclaimers about methodology. From May 2018 onwards, Downtown Partnership staff counted 1 person per individual, 1.75 people per tent, and 2.03 people per vehicle. And this is the methodology used by the Regional Task Force on Homelessness and the Housing and Urban Development Department. And apologies if you can hear the plane flying overhead. Secondly, due to the manual nature of the counts, there are some arithmetic errors in the data to be aware of. So specifically, the count for June 2015 is lower than it should be, and additional areas have been added over time into the counts. So as of right now, there are 10 neighborhoods, but counts in Golden Hill, Sherman Heights, and Barrio Logan began in 2022. They were not fully canvassed because they're outside of the Downtown Partnership's jurisdiction, so data for those 3 neighborhoods might only show up for a limited amount of years. And we've also included the link to the dashboard on the slide as shown for you to check out.
Thanks so much, Samantha. So yeah, I'm glad she mentioned the Survey 123 app. That was several years in the us offering, and they finally bit. So when they count again in January, it will all be a part of a new dashboard. They'll have an internal dashboard as they do the count, as well as we will have an updated public dashboard. So with that, any questions or comments for any of us?
Thank you so much, team. And yes, I would love to get some questions for them all. Yes, Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what a great job, by the way. I actually have a relative dear to my heart that was homeless for 35 years in Sacramento, and so this really hits home.
Thank you.
But the question would be more like interested in why set up a homeless camp in a specific area? Like, what's the correlation of services that attracts the homeless folks to be where they're at? And I've observed a lot along Highway 99, like in Fresno and Merced, that usually some folks just totally want to be isolated and far away from everybody. And those are kind of a few people, one or twos. But then when you see at least 5 to 10 folks or more, you start to look around and you see like the fast foods, the EBT, card, getting their cash somewhere. Um, Kind of clustered. I don't know what other, I don't know if there's drugs involved or what, but those kinds of correlations of why are these camps being set up? What is the correlation there?
It's a great question that we have not done that specific research here in San Diego. There have been others. I do research on homelessness in Boulder, Colorado, where we did survey people specifically about their location, and our findings were just like yours. Some of them said, I want to be around other people, or even admitted to, I want to be near where the drugs are being sold. And others said, I want to be away from people. And so they chose a further away under a freeway type of thing. Um, I would just from living here and doing the research say that you're probably onto something with the resources because we definitely, could overlay that and look. But there's also the mobility, and there is some research about mobility, but are they sleeping in the same place that they're spending the day? And I think that varies across people too, and across encampments. So the idea for those people not familiar with safe sleeping or safe parking lots, we started having safe parking lots here in San Diego several years ago, and where people can safely park overnight. They are provided services as well, but in some of the parking lots, the agreement with the business is that they have to be out by 7 in the morning. So they definitely have to go somewhere. Whereas the safe sleeping, which are essentially sanctioned campsites, the city of San Diego is providing tents for people in large parking lots. People can stay there. And I've heard that some people are like, this is my forever home, when in fact it was created to be a transition to finding forever homes that are not in tents and out in the street. So, would love to do more research on that and talk to you, Donna, or anyone further if you're interested in doing that research.
Well, thank you and great job, you guys. I know that I've seen it, this kind of perk up a little bit in the last 5 years, GIS focus on the homeless, but this is taking it way up a notch. Good
Well,
job.
thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for the team? I know I have a question for the students in the group. I know you are undergraduate students, and this is probably, if not the first, one of your first major research projects that you're working on. I'm wondering what some of your biggest takeaways are from doing this type of work and from getting involved in GIS like this.
You have to clean so much data all the time, and it's really difficult, and it'll take you weeks or sometimes months.
I would very much second that. Again, like cleaning the eviction data, as I illustrated, has been a long and tedious process, and we're still in the process of having an unanswered question. I realize that some data for the latest year is missing, so we have tried to contact the sheriff's office to see if they have the missing data, but they haven't responded. So it's definitely been a great experience just learning how to clean data, working with different organizations, both government and non-government, and just seeing how it all works together and making a story out of it.
Yeah, I haven't worked as closely with the data as the other student researchers have. But I think that seeing how GIS is applied for homelessness specifically and seeing the type of impact that that can have is really eye-opening when a lot of the GIS that I've learned is mainly about like transportation and stuff like that. But seeing the human impact that sort of geospatial analysis can have is really interesting, and it's been really eye-opening.
Yeah, to add a more serious note, I think that's exactly it. I think a lot of the times, like if you just do qualitative research on homelessness, it's not the full picture. And doing that quantitative work really helps people understand holistically that the scale of the problem is so large, and then they can connect that to the stories that we're telling in our more qualitative research.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Jennifer.
What would you say is, what do you think of the future of GIS and homelessness research? Like, what are promising, exciting new directions?
I'm gonna call out Jen because she's our boss. So I don't know if her question was to the rest of the group or us.
I wouldn't say if I knew the answer.
I mean, I'll try and answer it first since you asked. That I really think there's a lot of potential. For instance, the question that Donna asked, and just looking at mobility and space and contributing to the why, and really to Samantha's point about, merging the qualitative and the quantitative to get a clearer, a bigger picture that, you know, we all, of course, all of us talking about GIS in this call and doing research on it, of course, value spatial analysis. But I think educating people to the value is also a goal. And using it in an ethical, value-driven to how can we help manner instead of just because there's data out there, we can map it and we can analyze it. But would love to hear from any of the others, non-UCSD or non-Homelessness Hub folks too, if you have any thoughts on that. No?
Hi all, this is Amy. No, and Jen, it's great to see you, and it does make me think about some of the stuff that we have seen earlier in UCGIS week. It makes me think about in an earlier session about looking at sort of food deserts, food swamps, and access to things. And I think what we're seeing from the remote sensing and sort of the humanitarian side of, I think, being able to, map and Julie, what you're talking about, right? Some of the data was in PDFs or it's in, paper maps. And so I think that transition to be able to get some data then might allow us to explore some of those questions in ways that you have to have some of the data to be able to map with, but asking the questions, right? Like, what are the relationships to, we know transportation, but other environmental factors or other factors. The food deserts and the food swamps was really taking a look at the role of the dollar store as not being listed as a grocery store, but as another factor. And so what are these outside factors that may contribute in the future? But just I think having the data and being able to explore and look at things through a spatial lens, I think opens up the possibilities that maybe we haven't even started to explore or haven't been able to because the data hasn't been in a digital ready format. So that's just one thought, but.
Thanks, Amy.
I want to thank everybody again for this session as we come to a close. I think this was a fabulous session. I think we should give a big round of applause to all of our great speakers. I know I have certainly learned a lot, and I hope you can join us at 3 p.m. for a session of environmental geography lightning talks. And then at 4 p.m., we're going to have a workshop on the California Tree Species Range Atlas. And then we also have 2 more days of programming, tomorrow and Thursday. We hope to see you there. And don't forget about our virtual gallery. Please feel free to upload any materials, maps, etc. that you may have made. We would love to see them and share them with our wider GIS community. Thank you again for being here, and happy GIS week.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.